My wife almost killed our son, and honestly, I was happy. Okay, so I'm going to tell you a story today, and let me warn you, it's a long one. I've been carrying this around for years, and my therapist suggested I write it all out to help process it. Putting it on YouTube wasn't his idea, but I really need to hear what other people think. Even after all this time, I still don't fully understand how I feel about it. I know I messed up probably a lot, but I truly felt like I was doing the best I could at the time. My son, he was profoundly troubled. I mean, profoundly. If you've ever seen the movie We Need to Talk About Kevin, that's probably the closest way to understand what I'm talking about. When I watched that film, I felt like I was watching a documentary of my own life. I swear the writer must have had cameras in my house, that's how accurate it was. The only real difference was that in the movie, Kevin hides his true nature from his dad, showing it only to his mom. With my son there was no mask. His disturbing behavior was constant, for everyone to see. From the very moment he was born, it felt like something just wasn't right. My wife and I had planned for him, we tried to conceive and were absolutely thrilled when he arrived. He was wanted, he was loved. We showered him with affection and genuinely tried to give him a happy childhood. But from the day we brought him home from the hospital, he was just miserable. He cried nonstop for 13 months. I am not exaggerating, 13 months straight without a break. He would cry until he had no voice left, then keep crying, his little face scrunched up, no sound coming out, completely hoarse. There were even times he would literally cry in his sleep. I've never heard of or seen any other child do that. We took him to doctors, specialists, tried different diets, held him, rocked him, offered toys, swaddling, music, mobiles, everything we could possibly think of. Nothing worked. It was 13 months of grating, grinding, sleepless torment. Once he finally moved past that incessant crying phase, we foolishly thought we were in the clear. But it quickly became apparent that, for some unknown reason, he was just furious about being alive. I never once saw that child offer a genuine, joyful smile during all the years I knew him. Oh, I saw him grin a vicious, hateful grin many times, taking a perverse delight in causing pain or suffering or breaking a rule, but a smile born of real pleasure at something nice? No, never. Not a single time. He had no interest in anything positive. He seemed to be fueled by pure hatred, and everything he did was bent toward that. As soon as he could walk, his sole mission in life seemed to be destruction. He would break or try to break anything within his reach. He'd smash it, chew it, throw it in the toilet, whatever he could manage. After a while, he figured out how to remove his diaper and took immense pleasure in defecating and urinating anywhere he pleased. Then he learned to hide it, starting to relieve himself in places we wouldn't find right away, grinding it into carpets, making it even harder to clean and making the whole house reek. When he got older, between the ages of 9 and 15, he would urinate and defecate in our bed. Eventually, we put a lock on our bedroom door, preventing him from getting in. After that, he'd just leave a mess in the hallway right in front of our room. That specific kind of biological warfare started when he was about 2.5 years old, and he never outgrew it. I'm going to try to speed this up because I could literally talk for days about all of this, but as he grew older, he became more and more unmanageable. He would bite, kick, scream, scratch, and spit at anyone trying to interact with him. He was expelled from school twice before he turned 9, then allowed back in, and then finally kicked out for good. We had to change schools. The next one placed him in a special class, keeping him isolated from the other students. We even had to install a door with a lock on the kitchen because he would steal knives and use them to gouge the walls or furniture, or even chase people with them. When he was 10, he stabbed me pretty badly in the hip and backside. I still have the scars. As he aged, he grew darker. He moved on to setting things on fire and torturing local animals. There was a stray dog that hung around the park near our house. My son blinded it in one eye with a barbecue fork. He would dip cats' tails in gasoline and light them on fire. He truly became a violent, stinking, vicious beast living in our home. We were completely powerless to stop him. And before anyone floods the comments, yes, we had the kid in therapy. He saw a psychiatrist twice a week and was prescribed countless different medications over the years. Nothing worked. Therapy didn't work. Medications didn't work. Nothing worked. He was like a toxic cloud of hatred and fury, lashing out at anything within his reach. When my son was 16, my wife got pregnant again. I cannot even begin to describe how different our reaction was this time. Instead of joy, we felt sheer horror. This pregnancy had not been planned, and we were truly at a loss for what to do. Our son had been such an unending nightmare for 16 years. We couldn't stomach the idea of starting all over again from the beginning. We talked extensively about termination, but for two reasons. A, access to abortion wasn't as easy back then as it is now, and B, my wife was very much against it. We discussed many options. In the end, we decided my wife would carry the baby to term, and if it turned out to be like our son, we would put it up for adoption. We knew we simply could not go through that again with another child like him. And then we had a daughter. She was normal. Suddenly, we saw what our lives should have been like all along, how things would have been if our son hadn't been himself. She laughed at things. She breastfed without biting, though she didn't have teeth yet. You could tell she was just trying to eat, not tear her mom's breast off. After 4 months, she was sleeping through the night. She was happy. She was normal. I cannot describe the relief and happiness we both felt. I simply don't have the words for it. This is where I believe I really began to pull away from my son. Up until that point, whatever mistakes I made, I truly believe I had always tried to do what was best for him. I tried to help him and love him and care for him. I really did try. But when our daughter was born, my wife and I both instinctively just turned our attention to her. She became our entire focus, not out of malice towards our son, but simply because she was so much easier. She was so happy and sweet. Every moment we spent with her felt like magic. I understand this might sound wrong, but we honestly couldn't help it. I don't have a better explanation than that. My son hadn't cared much about my wife being pregnant. I honestly don't know if he truly understood it. But when we brought our daughter home, he started acting out even more. I didn't think it was possible, but he took it up another notch. By this time he was 17 and we were having explosive screaming matches daily. Usually, after we fought, he would storm out of the house and disappear for hours, sometimes returning the next morning. It was a relief. I actually started to look forward to our fights because it meant he would be away from us for a while. After our daughter's birth, my relationship with my son was almost completely gone. Our only real interactions were screaming at each other. My wife was even worse with him. She just had nothing left. By that point, if our son even entered the same room as her, she would just stop whatever she was doing and start shouting, "Get away from me! Get away! Get out!" Until he left. He started spending more and more time out of the house, which was a blessing for us. I have no idea what he was doing out there in the world, but we were just happy it wasn't being inflicted on us. As a consequence of our son's behavior, we had invested heavily in locks around our house. All of the cheap, thin interior doors in our home had been replaced with thick, dense wood doors that couldn't be kicked through, equipped with keyed locks that my wife and I both carried keys to. I know it sounds extreme, but locks and heavy doors were the best way we had found to create safe spaces from him. And again, before I get a barrage of messages, I was not locking my son in rooms like a prisoner. He had free reign of the house and could come and go as he pleased. My wife and I would lock ourselves in rooms to protect ourselves from him. If anything, we were the prisoners in our own home. On the particular day I'm talking about, I had argued with my son that morning, and he had left the house in a rage. My wife and I were enjoying some peace and quiet in the kitchen while our daughter napped in our bedroom. And then our daughter started crying. Any parent with young children can tell you get used to your child's cries, and after a while you can tell what they need. They cry differently if they're hungry, or need changing, or are just restless and want to be held. Babies communicate pretty well before they can speak. This cry was none of those things. This cry was terror. The second we heard it, my wife and I were both out of our chairs and sprinting to the room. The door was locked, of course, and it took a few precious seconds to find the right key and get it open. My son was in the room. We lived in a bungalow, and that monster had climbed in the window to get to her. He was standing over her crib with a steak knife in his hand. I have no idea where he got it. It wasn't one of ours. We controlled our knives very carefully and always kept them in locked drawers. I think he must have stolen it from one of our neighbors' houses. He had already broken her skin twice, once in the belly area and once on her arm. I could see blood running down. When I entered the room, he was dragging the back of the knife down her face, not cutting, almost tickling her with it, teasing her while she screamed. He looked up at us and smiled. Before I even knew what I was doing, I was already moving, running to put myself between them. I didn't think about it. I just moved instinctively. Even with that, my wife got there faster. It was like a movie on fast forward. She reached our son and bashed his hand away, knocking the knife across the room, and then shoved him with her whole body weight, so hard that he flew away from the crib and bounced off the wall. I picked up my daughter and held her while my wife shielded us. I could see her shaking, almost convulsing. I can vividly remember the smell of the room, the sound of my daughter screaming and wailing, and the look on my son's face as he stood there. Just nothing. Blank dead. There was nothing in his eyes, no emotion. He looked like an alien to me. I watched my wife take a step toward him. I could have reached out and stopped her, but I didn't. She stepped forward again, very close to him. I could have stopped her again, but I didn't. She waited, looking at him for maybe 3 to 5 seconds without moving, and then she punched him squarely in the face. Now, up until this point, you might have been picturing my wife as a typical woman, small frame, dainty, delicate. That is absolutely not the case. My wife does have a small frame, but dainty and delicate she is not, and never has been since I've known her. Since her early teens, my wife had been a boxer. MMA didn't exist back then, but karate and boxing were big, And my wife was a very talented amateur. She weighed about 130 pounds, carried a lot of muscle, and she knew how to punch. I had 70 pounds on her back then, and I have no doubt that in a real fight between us, she could have and would have pounded me flat. Neither of us had ever laid a hand on our son in anger before, but something broke in her that day, and all the years of anger and pain and sorrow and frustration just came pouring out. When she hit him, his head snapped back, and blood started gushing from his nose. He hardly reacted. He just looked at her with this shocked expression, like he didn't know how to process what had just happened. She waited another second, and then she hit him again. I could have reached out and stopped her. I could have dragged her out of the room, taken her away, calmed her down. I didn't. I just stood there and watched while she systematically started to pound him to a pulp. Every time he brought his hands to cover one part of his body, she would blast him somewhere else, body, head, over and over. He started screaming, crying out, yelling for her to stop. It was the most genuine reaction I'd ever seen him have to anything in his entire life. But she wasn't stopping. I watched her ramp up, hitting harder, faster, working him over like a heavy bag. He tried to swing at her and she slipped him easily. She was on autopilot, sinking deep into her training. I stood there watching for another minute. Then I turned my back on them and carried my daughter out of the room. I brought my daughter to the kitchen and gave her a bath in the sink. I discovered he had cut her a third time on the sole of her foot. All the cuts were superficial, thankfully. I cleaned her up and held her until she calmed down. I put some ointment and band-aids on her cuts. From our bedroom, I could still hear my son screaming, calling my wife horrible names, telling her he would cut off her head and desecrate her body. After a while, I didn't hear him saying anything anymore. I didn't even hear him crying out. I assumed he must have been knocked out. But I could still hear her beating him. That went on for a very long time. Long enough for my daughter to drift off to sleep in my arms. I just sat at the kitchen table waiting for her to finish. Finally, she came out and sat down across from me. Her hands were swollen and red. Her face and arms were splattered with blood. Her chest was heaving. We just stared at each other without saying anything. After a while, I asked her, "Is he dead?" She looked back at me and answered, "I sure hope so." I just nodded. That was all there was to say about that. I understood exactly how she felt. I felt the same way. I didn't know what to do, so we just sat there waiting silently. Eventually, my wife started crying and went to take a shower. I just stayed where I was, holding our daughter. After a long while, I heard moaning and sobbing coming from our room. It turned out my son wasn't dead. I went in to see how bad it was, and it was pretty bad. I've never seen a more merciless beating laid onto anyone before or since. He was lying on the floor, rolling around with blood leaking from his face, lying in a pool of vomit. His nose was squashed flat across his face. Both of his eyes were completely swollen shut and already starting to blacken. I could see that a couple of his fingers were bent at weird angles, and he had soiled his pants. I think he must have been missing teeth, but I couldn't see any on the floor. And I couldn't see inside his mouth because his lips were all puffed up and swollen. From talking to my wife about it later, I know now that she had systematically beaten every part of his body, focusing heavily on his legs. She told me she kicked him in the groin repeatedly until her legs grew tired, and had continued beating his body long after he had passed out. When my wife came out of the shower, I still didn't know what to do about our son. I didn't know whether to call the police or an ambulance, or take him to the hospital myself. I honestly had no idea what to do. After a while, I realized that I simply didn't care what happened to him anymore, and we decided to just let him live or die on his own. There was an in-law suite in the basement that we had never really used, and my wife, my daughter, and I just moved down there. We simply ceded the top floor of the house to my son and locked everything down, separating our lives entirely. There was plenty of food in the upstairs cabinets, enough for a couple of weeks or more, and he had a washroom and bedrooms to use. We had a washroom in the basement, a small kitchenette, and a separate entrance, so we just stopped going upstairs. We decided we were done with him. I figured we'd let his food run out and see what happened. Over the next week, we could hear him moving around upstairs sometimes. I think he just spent most of his time lying in bed recovering. I went to work, watching on high alert in case he attacked me in the driveway, but he never did. My wife stayed home with our daughter. She was never out of our sight. One night, we heard him going ballistic, smashing things and banging. We didn't respond. He never tried to get downstairs or get near us, though. I think he was afraid that if he got near us again, my wife might finish the job on him. After 3 weeks down in the basement, we hadn't heard anything from up above for a few days, so I ventured upstairs to the main floor of the house. The place was demolished, and there was no sign of my son. He was gone. It took months to repair the damage he had done, and get the main floor back to normal again. There was food and waste smeared all over the walls and broken glass on the floor, huge holes in the drywall. He had completely torn the place apart. He ripped up the linoleum in a corner of the kitchen, and emptied an entire foam fire extinguisher into the living room. I feel thankful that he didn't burn the house down with us in it. I'm honestly not sure why he didn't. The kid wasn't shy about lighting things on fire. After that, I lived in fear every single day that he would come back, that he would ambush us out of the blue and try to kill us. We moved house about 3 years later, and I finally stopped being afraid that he would show up again, as now he had no idea where we were. I finally felt safe from him. All this happened a long time ago. My son was born in the spring of 1971, my daughter in 88. I'm an old man now. I'll be 70 this year, and my wife passed away from cancer in 2016. My daughter is 31 now. I moved in with her and her husband after my wife passed. I've got 2 granddaughters and they are the joy of my life. I see a therapist a couple of times a month to talk about all this. I don't know where my son is. The last time I saw him was when he was lying on the floor of our bedroom, bleeding and beaten. I haven't heard from him since he left, which is more than 30 years now, and I don't want to. I carry a lot of guilt from that time and a lot of conflicted emotions. I didn't beat him myself, but I allowed him to be beaten and I thought he deserved it. I was happy it happened. I didn't try to kill him, but I would have been happy if he died. I will say that I do hope he was able to overcome his demons and go live a normal life somewhere. If he wasn't able to do that, if he stayed the way he was, then I truly do hope someone out there killed him. When I knew him, he was like a rabid dog, and whichever way it went, I just hope he isn't still out there hurting anyone else. I lied about being Jewish for 20 years and my life exploded. Okay, so get this. I'm not Jewish. Not even a tiny bit, not in my background, not culturally, nothing. If you ask me anything about the religion, I'd probably just stare blankly. But somehow for 2 decades everyone in my life has been convinced I am. And this is how it all happened. It all kicked off back in high school when I was in 11th grade. My family had just moved to a whole new world from California to the deep south, and honestly it was a pretty rough transition. I was constantly getting picked on, called all sorts of awful names just because I talked differently, and yeah, I got into my fair share of fights. Let's just say school wasn't exactly a walk in the park. Slowly, though, I started to make friends with some of the guys on the football team. My closest buddy among them was the center, a guy I'll call Greg. Now, Greg was pretty laid back compared to a lot of the other guys, but he definitely had some very strong, very open, and not so great opinions, especially when it came to race. One afternoon, I was driving Greg and a few other football players home, just chatting when Greg casually brought up synagogues. Without even thinking, the words just popped out of my mouth. Oh yeah, I've been to one of those. And folks, that's where the whole thing spiraled. One of the other guys immediately cracked a joke, something like, "Haha, you're a Jew." Trying to play it cool because these were the only friends I had at that point, I just went with it. "Haha, yep, I'm Jewish," I said, trying to sound nonchalant. And just like that, the floodgates opened. Greg, being Greg, went and told everyone on the football team that his new friend from California was Jewish. They all bought it, mostly because they figured all the Jewish people lived in California anyway. And from the football team, the rumor spread like wildfire through the entire school. First, I honestly thought it was all just a big joke. I figured everyone was just playfully calling me Jewish, so I just kept playing along. But then, something unexpected happened. I became the Jewish kid. And suddenly, I was actually popular. Everyone seemed to want to be friends with the different kid. Plus, my dad had a decent amount of money, especially compared to the low-income area where my school was located, so I could afford nice things, and people tend to gravitate towards that. Before I knew it, being Jewish became almost like my identity. It was who I was. So, whenever anyone asked about my religion, I'd automatically just say I was Jewish. Fast forward to the end of high school. The guidance counselors were helping everyone with scholarship applications. My counselor called me into his office and handed me a slip for a $5,000 Jewish American scholarship. The second I saw Jewish American scholarship, my first instinct was to just walk right out and toss it in the trash. But he insisted I sit down and fill it out with him. He then took it from me, ready to submit. I felt pretty awful doing it, but there was also a tiny bit of relief when I heard that these scholarships were only given to people who were ethnically Jewish. I figured no way I'd actually get it. But I did. A letter arrived in the mail, informing me that I had been selected as the winner of that $5,000 scholarship. I'd also gotten accepted into Dartmouth. I had really worked my tail off in high school, and I was the valedictorian, though I'll admit the competition wasn't exactly fierce. Still, I never thought I'd actually be able to afford a place like Dartmouth. But this scholarship was a massive help in making that dream possible. At that moment, I seriously considered spilling everything, declining the scholarship, telling everyone at school, admitting that nearly every form I'd ever filled out was a lie, revealing that I wasn't actually Jewish. I decided to talk to my dad first. He's always been the kind of person you can talk to about absolutely anything. So I laid it all out for him. The initial joke, how it turned into a lie, everything, and now this scholarship, which I hadn't told any of my family about. First, because I never thought I'd get it, and second, because they definitely wonder why a very non-Jewish person was getting a Jewish American scholarship. As soon as I finished, my dad looked me dead in the eyes with the most serious, disappointed expression. And then he burst out laughing, tears streaming down his face. The way he reacted, it must have been the funniest thing he'd ever heard in his life. He then told me he had received a letter asking if I was ethnically Jewish for a scholarship I had applied for. Being the kind of person he is, he just saw the chance for college money and simply wrote, "Yep, Jewish." Apparently that was all they needed. So my dad convinced me to keep the money and go to my dream college, and that's exactly what I did. The moment I arrived at the university, I was immediately greeted by some representatives from the group that awarded me the scholarship, a Jewish American organization funded by wealthy Israelis. They weren't just congratulatory, they practically enlisted me into all these Jewish clubs. They even got me set up in a local synagogue, and I met everyone there. I would later find out that 2 of those people would become my professors, and they were very, very Jewish. Finally, they told me they'd arranged the whole birthright thing for me where they fly American Jews out to Israel. I was absolutely overwhelmed. I was at my dream school and then all this was piled on top of it. It was just too much. I thought about coming clean so many times, but I kept feeling like everyone around me would suddenly feel betrayed and abandon me. I ended up becoming really good friends with a lot of people in these Jewish clubs. My teachers and I bonded so much better because they believed I was Jewish. I met the most beautiful Jewish girl. I actually met her through her mother, who approached me in a cafe because I was with the local rabbi. She asked if I was Jewish. I said yes, and she immediately told me I'd love her daughter. We went on a date and instantly hit it off. And of course I got a free trip to Israel. All of this was happening while I was dealing with really severe depression. I felt horrible every single second of every day. On top of the already immense stress that university life puts on you, there were so many times I came incredibly close to just throwing myself off a bridge or a tall building, but I could never quite bring myself to do it. Somehow, I managed to get through 11 years of college earning my doctorate. I landed a job at a history museum back on the West Coast, married that Jewish girl, had a beautiful Jewish wedding with her entire family, and my 2 parents. My dad had actually spilled the beans to my mom about 2 days after I told him, and she found it equally hilarious. We've had 3 wonderful little Jewish babies. The museum even put me in charge of organizing and creating a huge Holocaust and Jewish American history exhibit, even though that's not even remotely my specific field. And in just a few months, when the current curator retires at the age of 96, I'm hoping to take his place. He's been training me for the job. I've worked there the longest and I've made sure I'm incredibly good at what I do. My life has truly turned out great, but deep down, it will always haunt me that my entire existence, everything I have is built on a lie. My kids' lives, my life, my wife's life. It all stemmed from a single joke in a car 20 years ago. I honestly never planned on telling a soul about this. But today my oldest son, who's 9, told me that he doesn't think he believes in God. And I told him that I agreed. That was the first time in 20 years that I told the truth about my religion, and didn't lie. My son wants to tell his mom that he doesn't want to continue being Jewish, and I'm thinking I might use this as my own way of getting out of the lie too. I told him we'd tell her tomorrow at dinner, and he seems almost as excited as I am, but equally as nervous. Wish us luck, I guess. I'm still not sure if I should tell her the absolute whole truth, or if I should just leave it at, I no longer want to be Jewish. So I talked to her and I decided to just tell her everything. And you know what? It didn't go at all like I expected. She told me she'd actually had a feeling I wasn't Jewish from the very beginning. But she said she didn't marry me because I was Jewish. She married me for me, completely regardless of my faith. She told me she was so sorry that I felt like I had to hide this from her for all these years, and that I don't have to pretend to be Jewish if I don't want to. But honestly, like a lot of people have commented, I do feel sort of culturally Jewish now. I definitely identify more as a member of the Jewish community than I do any others. We've decided we're not going to pressure any of our kids into Judaism. We're going to let them decide what they want to do for themselves. And my wife and I agreed that it would be best if we found a way to give back, since all the amazing opportunities afforded to me came from the Jewish community. We're going to get involved with an organization, and we're donating to 3 different scholarships $5,000 each, and we're going to try and help fund birthright trips whenever we can. I really want to thank everyone who's commented with advice. I'm hoping this can truly be a brand new chapter in my life.